For this recording, I'm joined by Gemma Bulos. Gemma has reinvented herself more times than most of us probably dare to. From preschool teacher to bartender to professional singer to building a global movement to social entrepreneur and academic. She spent years traveling the world with little more than a backpack and a guitar, following curiosity rather than a fixed plan. What I find particularly fascinating about Gemma is the thread underneath all of those reinventions: a deeper belief in people's potential, a fascination with stories and connection, and an increasingly strong conviction that our role isn't necessarily to change people, but to create the conditions for them to become more of who they already are. So rather than talking about what Gemma has built, I wanted to understand how she became the person capable of doing that. I want to know what shaped her, what she has learned through all those reinventions, and what she discovered about herself, power, listening, and change along the way. Okay, Gemma, I'm very happy you're here, and I want to try to understand so much what you've done. I've researched you, so I know about that. I'm much more interested in what has given you the capacity and the belief in yourself to do what you are doing. And because you were doing music before you went into entrepreneurship, I want to ask you, when did you notice that you can use your voice to move people?
I always sang since I was a kid, and I was one of those people who just sang under their breath all the time, much to the dismay of my family. And I used to love singers who just told a lot of stories. They didn't necessarily have to have perfect voices, but the songs I was always resonating with were the ones that have this, you know, story around something that was not only relevant, but was said in such a beautiful way. And so that's when I started to perform professionally. Those were the kinds of songs I was picking, because the piece about music that I absolutely love is, people can interpret it however they want. And it's not even going to be one way you interpret it. You're going to interpret it in ways that are based on your mood at the time, are based
Mm.
on the experience that you've already had, and are based on something that you want to see happen. And those are the ones that really stick in you and then make your heart flip upside down and make you make bad decisions and things like that. And so for me, music was always just a way of telling stories. And I think that has always sort of been what is the through line throughout my entire sort of reinvention. Like you said, I started out as a preschool teacher and a waitress and a bartender. Then I was a professional singer, and then I built a global movement, and then I became an entrepreneur, and then I became an academic. And so all of these sort of crazy reinventions that in my mind, I never would have imagined. If you would ask me what I wanted to be as a kid, there were two things. One was, a singer, and that was very typical. And then the other was I wanted to go into the military, which was such a crazy
Okay.
dichotomy, because that's so not my personality. But maybe I just felt in some way that I needed to have some sort of regimen or some sort of structure, because I was always such a loosey goose. And, this is my fire horse year in Chinese astrology. Horses are, first of all, totally free. You cannot pin them down. They will just go and do whatever they want. They have no boundaries. And then fire horse, because they have different elements like fire horse, air horse,
Mm-hmm.
water horse. Fire horse is the worst if you wanted to talk about restlessness and boundlessness, right? And so I never really had structure. I was just it was like squirrel. It's like wherever my interest got piqued, I would move there. And then I'd totally, nerd out over here, because I don't know. I think I was just sort of this child of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something also too that I felt like has been a through line, the storytelling and the curiosity. And the music piece has always been the piece that makes me express it in the best way possible. Like I couldn't do it with words. I could not words only, right? I can do it just
Mm,
public speaking. Even though I do a lot of public speaking, the music piece adds so many different elements to it. And
yeah.
then that's how people connect. I wrote that one song that it was, it's so hard to write another because that was such a great one. And it did such a big thing in the world. And, people came together because of that song and they liked the lyrics, sure, but it gave it, I mean, I'm going to use words that other people have used. It like gave them life. It gave them purpose. And it was exactly what it gave to me. Like that was when I wrote that song. It was because I needed to have some sort of direction after September 11th. I needed to have some sort of focus when I was like totally desperately trying to be a professional and, famous singer. And so, that whole thing around wanting some regimen and wanting some structure, it was something I could absolutely learn, but it was something that I wasn't good at. And so I think that's what really drove me to have all these different reinventions because everything new, every time I made a decision, it was a new story, right? Every time I made a good one or a bad one, it was a new experience, And so I think that's the piece around music. It finds itself in me as a way to express something that I might not have been able to tell myself or experience myself. And you know, I kind of find it embodying myself. And all of a sudden,
Mm,
I'm doing something new. I remember being on the subway once and I was listening to Kate Bush. It was from This Woman's Work, the most beautiful song in the world, in my opinion. And it was the first time I'd ever heard it. And I started crying on the subway and some lady came over and just started like comforting me. And I was like, no, it's just a beautiful song. I'm not sad. This is just like the most beautiful part of storytelling is finding yourself connecting to whatever the lyrics are or whatever the music is or whatever the swells are, just because it's telling a story that you're resonating with.
mhm. Right. And you seem to have learned from that, learned to use stories to connect people, to weave things together, to even connect people to something that's bigger than just themselves and their immediate surroundings. And you've done
I
that
think
across cultures. That's really impressive.
it was, when I was in it, because I traveled for a few years before we actually mobilized, I don't know another word for it, but mobilized the Million Voice Choir because I traveled around to 30 some odd countries. I was singing and speaking in so many different venues like schools and conferences and gatherings. And everywhere I went, it was weird. Some people would like, I remember the very first place I ever was invited. And it was this gathering of a woman who heard the song because this gentleman played it at one of his workshops. And he talked about what I was doing, like building a Million Voice Choir. And she emailed me. She invited me to Cork, Ireland. She had never done anything like this before, but she knew she wanted to put a choir together. And so I got there, and by the time I got there, she had convened this amazing group of people in this beautiful church called Christ Church. And she was telling me how she had, uh, to get people to come do it because she didn't have that kind of network, right? To have people come and be part of the event that she was hosting. She would literally walk around with her Walkman and then she'd stop people on the street. She'd go, you got to hear this song. Come and join us. We're going to be singing it together for world peace, And she got this huge church full of people in the room. And then she had children from the community doing choreography to the song. And it was bananas. And she was saying how that was the first time she ever felt a level of purpose that felt bigger than her. And it was just the song. And, I'm not going to sit there and say it was me because the way that song came to me was not how I typically write songs. When I typically write songs, it's painful. I take months. I try and craft the perfect chord progression and the lyrics matching the melody. And it just takes me months and it's totally frustrating.
Mhm.
This song, I was in a 10-day silent meditation retreat. All of a sudden, I just heard this choir. I heard the altos and the sopranos and the counter, melodies and the lyrics and the swells and the way in which the song changes from one sort of feeling to another. And it just dumped on me. And so
Hmm.
I knew this wasn't my song, right? I knew it was something that I was the lucky one who was the vessel who was able to receive it. Because that song was
Right.
already out in the ethers, right? I'm going to get a little woo here. I
That's
believe
okay.
that the song was already in the ethers, and I just happened to be the absolute lucky one to be able to hear it and then let it do what it was supposed to do in the world.
Hmm.
So, because like I said, that song wasn't mine. In fact, while I was, convening people and traveling to 36 countries and multiple cities, I remember I was trying to sort of set a plan. I was trying to be like regimented and scheduled and all that stuff. And when you do that kind of stuff and you don't approach it in a way that is, not finite, like say, for example, you make a decision. I'm going to be in New York, then I'm going to go to Delhi, and then I'm going to go to Seoul, right? And you say, I'm going to do it this way and this way. When you are so stuck to that plan, you're not open to anything, another way of it happening. And when you don't have that, when that doesn't happen the way you want it, that's where disappointment comes in. Disappointment doesn't come in when you sit there and go, here's my plan, and something else comes that is going to take you in a different direction. Because if you're in the curious mindset, then you're going to go, oh, I wonder what the universe has in store for me today. And then walk down a different path you weren't planning to walk. And I
Yeah.
remember at the time I was feeling so regimented and so like scheduled. I had to stop myself because I realized that was my plan for the song. That wasn't the song's plan, right? The song had a life of its own. And I realized at the time that, I was, just like I was talking about being the vessel that had the song,
Receive the song.
downloaded the song. Yeah, received the song. I was its protector as well. I was only supposed to steward it to do what it was supposed to do. So in my mind, I was like Frodo and the song was like the ring and I had to protect it so it could go where it needed to go. I mean, albeit it wasn't something destructive. It was
Hmm.
more about, being positive, but that's sort of how I had to see the world and see my role in it. And that's has one of the things, and I'm going to go back to your question before, that's kind of another one of the through lines. It's like when I started ventures or, started any new initiatives, I treated it like a baby, not something that was mine. And a baby, you're not like, you're stewarding it. You're hoping to create the conditions that it's going to be able to thrive and live the life it was supposed to live and all that stuff. That's one of the reasons I feel like I don't want to say succeed because that's such a different, that's so,
Mm.
it depends on who you ask what success looks like, right?
So,
So,
how did you get to that mindset? I mean, I recognize that that is true for the different initiatives that you've been involved in because you don't want it to be just charity and then they do work. No, you want to actually have a lasting impact and steward that this is something that is sustainable in the long run, that can happen without you being there, without the charity coming in again. Where did this mindset first evolve and how did you notice that you can translate that also into business?
I'm going to go back to my fire horse. So, fire horses can't stay in one place all the time and it can get bored. Right. And so really just knowing myself and knowing my, you know, what's that word? Flitty? I don't know why. Like I just sort of fluttery, I just sort of flutter around because something interests me at that moment. And there are some really, negative sides to that and that I don't complete everything, right? Or I don't complete it in the deepest way because I'm splitting my energies, right? Or I don't, I lose, it loses value for me, even though it had incredible value when I first started. So, that's how I feel like I've been kind of all over the place because of that. And the mindset came because I think it is sort of naturally in me if you believe in astrology. And I also think it's because I just like to learn about the world, right? I think it's so every corner you turn is just going to be such a new experience. I mean, every single decision you make, even if it's the littlest thing of just like stepping into a store because, you needed ginger. And all of a sudden you see this new intriguing fruit that you never saw before. And all of a sudden you found your favorite fruit, right? It just feels like, when you talk about having a map and, knowing, having a destination, and that's sort of your goal, right? And then you have a map to get there. So, oh, I have to do this first, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do this. That's all sort of planning. But once you're on that journey and once you're on that path, you didn't even know you were going to stop and see that, beautiful garden of flowers that you had to stop and just like talk to the gardener, right? Or you didn't realize a few miles down that you were going to find this restaurant that had the best fried green tomatoes, right? All of that stuff is just an opportunity to like have a different experience. And it could take you off another path, or it could just like change yourself just a little bit, that after all of those incremental changes in your mindset and those incremental perspectives sort of like expanding and merging and meshing, all of a sudden you've got a new story, right? Every decision is a new story. And I think that's one of the most intriguing things, because I love being able to share some of the crazy stories I've had in my life because of that curiosity, because of that attitude of like, all right, let's see what the universe has in store for me today. Right. And I think, and for me, things that happened there were so many synchronicitous things that would never have happened had I not like took the blinders off, right? There were so many things I allowed to happen because because I was curious, and I didn't have just like one focus. I was able to sort of look around and see what was
Hmm.
out there and see
Yeah.
what moved me, right? And what made me feel alive.
So really, a key part of your success is being in the present, being aware of what's happening around you and feeling where you're being pulled.
Totally. It's like, it's the difference between what can I do and, how can I be of service? And, I don't want to get so, that feels so like trite, but I really do see it that way in, what is this? It's so Ted Lasso, right? It's like, what does this situation need right now? And the situation doesn't necessarily mean that whatever I'm doing, I need to figure out the situation. It means wherever I am at that moment, like you said, being present. What does it need right now? Do I need to help that person walk across the street, or do I need to tell that musician that they blew me away with their jazz solo, right? What does this situation need right now? And it's for both me and who's ever receiving it, right? For me, it's like finding the joy in being able to tell somebody what value they brought to me at that moment, right? And then for them to be recognized for something they've offered so freely to the world, that's my reference to the musician. And
Hmm.
so, it really just becomes this sort of fluidity that brings you to places and helps you to see things in such different ways that you have never seen or experienced before.
This is really interesting because in the conversation with Rodrigo, who you work with and who recommended I have you on, one of the things that I realized and that he shared is that he's shown up with curiosity and just moved with it. And now you tell me the same thing. And from what I know about you and him, your personality is a bit different. You're very outspoken and energetic, and he's much more grounded and calm, but still the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it works. It works as a lifestyle and a mindset, and it works for anyone. I mean, I think it's one of the core things we need, especially, I mean, we've always needed just as a way to live in the world where we are seeking purpose and seeking joy and seeking and experiencing, what we're what we wanted to experience, and then seeing it sort of as this way in which makes us different, right? So, especially in the age of AI, right? AI is not curious. It's just looking for answers that have already been out there and they've curated it, right? But we as a human, right? Our curiosity is what makes us creative and what makes us valuable to me, right? Because that curiosity starts turning into this like soup of so many different ingredients that only one person in the world, only one Gemma in the world is going to have this one perspective. There's this beautiful fable that I love. It's my favorite fable, and I use it all the time when I talk about our lives, right? And talk about finding value in our lives and how we are valuable, because that's such a big thing in the, women's space, always has been. And so it's called Fatima the Spinner. And Fatima is this young girl who is from a family of spinners. And she and her father go off, it's a Persian fable. Her and her father go off on a ship to sell their wares, and they have a shipwreck. She's the only survivor. She ends up on this remote island, and this family takes her in, and they're not mask makers. They're weavers. And so she learns weaving. Totally, seemingly random skill that doesn't connect to anything, but that was the situation she was in, and that's the skill she learned. And then the next thing, another terrible, tragedy befalls her. She gets kidnapped by pirates. And then when she's on the ship, she learns how to build masts. And so here she is with these seemingly random skills that she learned out of survival, out of, family, out of force, right? All of these seemingly random skills. Then there was a Chinese emperor who wanted to build like a tent, but no one in the world knew how to build it because they didn't have the right skill, the right combinations of skills to do it,
Hmm.
except her. She had the skills of the weaving and the spinning and the mask making. So that was those were the perfect skill sets. And that's how I see all of us. All of us
Hmm.
have had such random, crazy skills. Like, I can identify some of the skills that I learned bartending that's serving me right now, in Africa, right? I can see some of the things that I learned in being a preschool teacher and how I work in academia. And so my combinations of skills that I've been able to sort of cultivate over time accidentally, not even like intentionally, right?
Hmm.
Accidentally has become the reasons I can do what I do at this moment, right?
Yeah.
I can do what I can do with Accelerate Impact and Rodrigo right now because of that experience, because my focus is leadership and, storytelling and value and future readiness, right?
Hmm.
And all of that is things I've experienced, not out of a book, not out of, a classroom project. I learned it because I was sleeping on benches when I was building a Milligan Boys Choir. I traveled for 10 years with no money, and I had no permanent address. I just had my
Wow.
backpack and my guitar.
Yeah.
So that to me, those experiences have brought me to things that I'm doing that no one else could do, at
Hmm.
least not in the way that I do them.
Hmm.
And that's my value.
So, when traveling a lot and having lived for 10 years in a very unconventional way, I suppose you've had plenty of time also for self-reflection and soul searching. I'm wondering, what were some things that you realized on that journey?
Yeah. So yes, I absolutely have had, a ton of experience and even 20 times more tons of time to reflect. Think, first of all, I'm going to be 60 in 2 months. And so this whole idea of turning 60 and then having to look back at your life. And I think a lot of people will look back at their life with this filter of, what do I regret? Right? What didn't I do that I wanted to do? What is something that, that didn't happen that I could have made happen? Right? These are all things. And I think I did have those moments younger. I think it was built into our psyches. I think it was part of a lot of storytelling, right? Where people regret not doing certain things. And it just became sort of part of our culture. about regret. And coming up on this age, I'm actually looking back with a completely different filter. My filter has been, how did I reinvent myself from this one life into this other life? What did I take with me and what did I have to learn then? Right. And then the next life, the next reinvention, what did I take from that, the past experience with me that was useful, but what more did I have to learn? And I think for me, I did that exercise recently and it was so intriguing because I was like, oh my God, of course, because I don't think all of us dive into something that we are completely ill-equipped for, right? I think there are always going to be skills that we have that will help us. I don't necessarily think we're going to be able to survive it, but we've got some element in our way of living that's going to not make it as worse than it is, right? Worse than it can be. So for example, if I were to, I'm going to give you an example of how I went from being a singer to being, constructing water, water and sanitation technologies in the developing world with no experience in engineering, no experience in construction. How did I go from there to there? Right. And part of what I was looking at was what did I need to do as this person, as a, person who needed to raise money, a person who needed to influence, leaders in villages and funders and whatever, right? What did I bring from my life as a singer? And I was like, I had produced my own shows. I had to get people in the room. I had to influence them. I had to
Right.
convince them to spend money on me, right? And then I built a million voice choir. Not only did I, use the song and perform and move people to do things, they did it, right? And so those were skill sets that I already brought with me.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't, but it was dangerous for me to just lean on those skill sets because I'm, if I'm building something that I've never built before and have no experience building, and it's water, right? We're talking about life and death here, right? But, it was enough for me to go, you know what? I've learned harder things. I've done harder things. If I were to look at myself as a 3-year-old, at the moment I was like 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, just standing up and walking was harder than anything, but I did it, right? I didn't know math at all or physics or anything like that, but I
Mm-hmm.
learned it, right? So when you look at a place where you want to be, but it's not where you are now, you've done harder things. You can learn. Your
Mm-hmm.
curiosity will help you to learn it in a way that it's going to sink in, right? And then you find ways to learn it. If you can't learn it on your own, you get a tutor. If you don't learn it on your own, you can take a course. But you have the capacity to do hard things. You've already done it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's sort of for me how I approached the world and seeing and being okay not knowing because I can learn.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me wonder, is there anything that fortunately or unfortunately you had to learn the hard way?
So, I mean, I can go back to that, like going, yeah, I can learn this because sometimes it's the fake it till you make it thing is, it's a good saying and it works in some scenarios, but not all. So
Yeah.
the fake it till you make it works. It works well when there's no high stakes,
Mm.
right? If I fake it till I make it when I learn how to do office stuff and figure out how to do a workshop after never, teaching, whatever, right? I can figure that out. You can fake it
Mhm.
till you make it because, you can be present, listen to what's going on, respond and, and pray that you'll just do better the next time. But when, I'm going in and I'm teaching people to do stuff I don't have a deep experience in. I have a little bit. I have like, some knowledge of it, but I don't know really how to do it. Faking it till you make it doesn't work. But one of the ways in which I've enjoyed not having to learn everything, because if I think that if I'm going to start a nonprofit or a venture or whatever, if I think because I've never done it, I'm not going to be able to do it, then you're pretty much already failed.
Mhm.
But if I go into it knowing that I have the drive and I have the mindset of curiosity and, constant learning, then I can always find other people who do the things that I don't do well, right? Because I started this by wanting to construct and build clean water and sanitation technologies in around, but I brought somebody else who did it better. So then I could do the stuff that I like to do, which was going and getting people to support our mission, to fundraise, to get partners, to do all the things that I do really well, and let my partner, who loves to construct and who loves to do all that stuff, that's his like zone of genius. Let him do it, right? It's just surrounding it because, as entrepreneurs, we can't do it alone, and not even entrepreneurs. Nobody can do anything alone. I don't care what anybody says about,
Yeah.
not anything that's big and meaningful, especially if we're talking about startups, right? You
Hmm.
can't do it alone. And so that's when you just start surrounding yourself with other incredible people, allowing them to shine in ways that they can contribute and be significant in ways that'll be useful for you, and they're excited to do it, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of that zone, finding your zone of genius and that
Yeah.
quadrant where they say zone of genius, zone of competence, zone of what is it? Zone of incompetence is the last one. I forgot that the other one is like, zone of you can do it, but why? Right. So
Hmm.
we want everybody ideally to be working in their zone of genius and their zone of competence. Their competence, they can do it. It's just not what makes them sing or what they do so good that it comes so naturally, right? The competence
It's
is
not what they're uniquely good at.
yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing. It's like just I mean, that's with Accelerate Impact and the colleagues with Rodrigo and the colleagues that we brought together. My gosh, all of us have such different skill sets. And, you know, where this kind of skills that I can offer are so complemented by the other things that it doesn't just feel like this silo when we're supporting startups, right? I'm not just this siloed expert in X that doesn't feel like it's a 360 support system, right? So I think that was one of the greatest examples of me doing something where I felt valuable and everybody else was equally valuable, and that there's no real like leader here. Well, I mean, there's no real leader here. There's this like unit, and this unit just, you know, if it was a top, it could be totally spinning, and one could be over here, serving this group on that to be able to do that thing, and over here and over here. So it just, that whole thing around just surrounding yourself with amazing people is what I think. Now I'm going to use the word success. It actually, I think it actually accelerates success in a way that you wouldn't have felt like you had to do absolutely everything and learn everything, because then you're just going to be stuck being, jack of all trades and a master of none.
Now, I don't know how perfect this joint group of people with different expertises is, but I'm wondering what kind of advice maybe do you have to find out who the people are that can provide this social support group, whether it is in the same venture or doing different things and just supporting each other?
Yeah, this group formed because we were all working in silos. We were supporting a huge cohort of multiple startup companies who were starting, they were launching, ventures for the first time, had never done it before, while also balancing other really life pulling other priorities, right? And so we had known each other for years before we decided to do this, because what we were seeing, and this is again the curiosity piece, right? What we were seeing as we were working in silos as siloed experts with specific skill sets to serve, all the different startups and all the different companies, we started to have conversations about those companies and then seeing how much aligned we were, but also how much we wanted to help these companies. And the thing is, we were doing all of this for free. If we actually looked at the number of hours that we spent, providing these services, we would be up into the hundreds of thousands, per person because of the amount of time we spent with these students. So that was one thing that came together was, we were starting to sort of align and seeing that we wanted these students to succeed. The other way was that we started to work together to tag team with each other to make sure that each company had what they needed. And then we started to see that, they would ask, somebody like me, and I'm like, you know what? I can help you with your financial modeling, but you know what? You know who's the genius? That's, Rodrigo. Go to him. And we just started to like send send people to each other with no ego at all, right? Because all of us have been in the startup world for so long, we could have easily taught them everything they needed to know individually, right?
Mhm.
But no, we started to see this network of support that was surrounding this team. And we just happened to be this group that did it and liked each other while we were doing it, right? And
Mhm.
had the same sort of vision. And so that's how that came together. And I have another network that I absolutely love. And it was a fellowship that I got and was an award for best emerging social entrepreneur in the world. And this network, they were all winners over the last 30 something, some odd years. And they were all like idea stage or startup, right? And at that stage, your fear is totally different than when you're scaling, right? Your fear is, can I do this? Your fear is, I've never done this before. Your fear is, I'm all alone. Nobody feels this way. My family is completely not supporting me. They're telling me to go get a job. They are doing 100 things where only one of them they're good at. They've spent all of this time, once they have the idea, they have to spend all this time getting the money for it and doing all the logistics and operations that they don't even find themselves doing the program anymore. And that's the reason they got into it. Right. And so that where all of these different startups over these 30 years, I feel like they connected so well because they were all afraid. They were
Mhm.
all alone. And we were able to really support each other at the same sort of levels, right? All of us were startups. All of us hadn't done this before. And so in being able to be in that kind of community, that community is not necessarily like, oh, here's some advice. Why don't you do this? That community was, oh my God, you guys, I am not going to be able to pay my staff. Oh my God, you guys, I'm totally burnt out. Oh my God, you guys, I just talked to this donor and I friggin' blew it, right? It's the people you can tell who are failing in the same ways that you are or having the same challenges. And then you start finding those people who you want to surround yourself with. Because that group, they're not necessarily a group I started working with, but they were a group that I came together with where we met regularly so that we could actually flush out ideas with each other. And so you want those kinds of communities. You want your work community who are all sort of aligned and uh contributing their value, and then you want that group who are just going to be like where you are as a person and as needing to be whole and needing to be useful and significant, and you need that group too, right? And so that's just experientially, that's how I've formed at least two of my most significant communities.
Yeah, and I've experienced myself that especially the second group does ask for vulnerability as well. I'm in an entrepreneurs club, and we had our monthly meeting the other week, and a couple of days before, the founder asked me like, "Hey, John, do you have anything that you want to share?" And I'm thinking like, "Damn, yes, I do, but I didn't want to share it." And then, well, in that moment, I already knew, okay, you got to do it. Like,
You have to now. We're not
this
going to let you go until you do.
he asked for a reason, right?
Yeah.
He didn't know, but he was guided to ask me and not somebody else. And and I shared, and it was very difficult for me to actually to get to the point, but I shared vulnerably. I shared what was going on, and my group of about 20 people, and 3 people said like, "Hey, let's get together afterwards, and I'm willing to support you. I'm willing to think that this is through with you, willing to give you some of the energy that I feel that you don't feel about this topic. Let's do it."
Beautiful. That's exactly it, right? And they're the ones who know it. They've been in the grind the same way as you, right? They know what you're feeling. Your family doesn't. They want you to, be happy and have money. They don't want to see you struggling. I mean, all the way through many of my different initiatives, my parents were just like, get a job, get a real job, right? Because I was so all over the place and making all my money in so many tiny different ways. And yeah, I think I can take it, right? It's not, I have a constitution where that's okay for me. Not everyone can do it. I mean, definitely not everyone can do a 10-year, travel around the world for 10 years to 65 countries and not end, you know, with a backpack and a guitar. So it's just not for some people, not for many people. So,
To become the person you are today, what is something that you had to let go?
my mind is saying ego, but we're always going to have it. And I definitely know I still have it, right? I've never let go of my need to have some sort of visibility and recognition. Because I was a performer, right? I always wanted to have some level of adoration. I think we'd all be lying if the performers of the world would all be lying if we didn't want to have some level of adoration and recognition. But I think some of the things I'd had to let go of are, I'm going to go back to decision making because that seems like that's something that keeps coming back to me, especially right now, right? Just seeing the weight of how I approach decision making, where the weight of decision making when you decide, when the outcomes need to be succeed or fail, right? And it needs to happen or not happen. And it's finite. If none of those two things happen, it doesn't matter. If one of those two things happen, it doesn't matter what happened around it. You know what I mean? But what I've had to sort of let go is just the weight of decision making, the yes or no of decision making. Did it happen or did it not? And sort of see decision making more as and treating them more like experiments. You know, this decision is going to get me to do something that I may not know the outcome, right? So if I don't know the outcome and I approach it like a scientist rather than a, I can't think of a metaphor right now, but somebody who, a planner. If I approach it like a scientist, then I look at all the factors. I look at what's going on and you're trying to find anomalies or you're trying to find something that's going to bring you new thoughts and so for me, the letting go of that kind of decision making has been something I think I've been working on unknowingly for years because I had to stop believing I was failing every decision I made. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I had to, and I had to also recognize that sometimes when things succeeded after that one decision, I didn't necessarily reflect and figure out what the factors were that made it succeed, right? Making one decision is not the thing that's going to make it succeed or not. It's the conditions around it and the different factors. So when you succeed, you find yourself not really looking at the factors that made it succeed. And so you're not dissecting it in a way that goes, what was the meat there, right? What was something that I might be able to take and say, this was the lesson I learned from it. It
Hmm.
really, and so just my approach to decision making has been, I think, one of my greatest sort of purges, not
Yeah, yeah.
making it
Hmm.
be so heavy. I mean, there's going to be consequences, certainly,
Yeah.
but don't put myself down for it all the time.
I'm imagining. that you could be in a position of making a decision whether to do a new initiative in a certain country, in a certain region, and it's a yes or no. And you know that if it's a yes, you're going to improve the lives of many people. And if it's a no, then, well, you don't.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that accurate?
So yes, and it's that because the decisions aren't, I'm going to use this example because I think that is a good example, but this is kind of more accurate in my head, is that if I decide I am going to do what you just said, right? To see the success or try and identify all the factors that went into succeeding here and then launching it in another country. The decision, the factors of that decision have to be more than just replication. It has to be, is there the right people in place? What kind of adjustments do we need to make for it to be appropriate for that region, right? And so the decision is less about it's less about like if I do it here and then I replicate it here, if it succeeds or doesn't succeed. No, you or you saying that it either happens or it doesn't, right? So it's less about that it happens or it doesn't. The decision can be to do it, to try it, to experiment, to see what, are there at least, some conditions that are already, in place, and then to be able to identify the other things that aren't in place in order for it to have a life. And it's less about it being duplicated, but it's more
Hmm.
about, so what are the decision to go someplace is, is more about, all right, so we've decided to go there. What are the things that we need to do? What questions do we need to ask once we're there? Because we can go there, but we don't have to, we can dip our toe. We don't have to go whole hog, you know, be curious and open yourself up to possibility. And I think the possibility is the factors, and because something might work if you met the right people, but if you met the wrong people, then it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Some things might work if you don't get certain people involved and you worked in this region instead of that region, it might succeed. And so that kind of stuff is I think it's more around the market research. The decision to go in another place is really based on the market research. What are the minimum qualities or minimum characteristics or minimum factors that we at least need to have in place in order for us to even consider going to some place like this? But
Got
it
it.
doesn't preclude
Hmm.
us from having a pilot thing it.
Yeah. So you're obviously a person who's very aware that it's important to listen and to understand the situation on the ground. And I'm wondering now, where do you draw the line between listening and actually going in and breaking the patterns?
Breaking whose patterns?
The people that you listen to otherwise.
So what I need to sort of know the purpose of breaking patterns. Is that the type of conversation I'm having?
So I'm thinking of this. You talked about on in previous formats about how women empowerment often doesn't happen because there's a certain view of what a woman is supposed to do and not to do. So
Yeah.
yes, you want to go in and listen and understand what is their life like, and when do you choose to just say it doesn't have to be like this?
Yeah. Interesting. I think some of the best influencers are the ones who are the best leaders, are the influencers who ensure that people come to the decision on their own. Right. And so what the work that we've been doing in water. So I started in the Philippines and then, now I'm in East Africa, and we're working with women who are, the majority are undereducated in that they probably dropped out either in elementary school or secondary. They are living in rural areas and, would be considered living in poverty. They have been in relationships that are where they are inferior and, not always safe. So I'm not saying all of them are, but there are a majority who live in those kinds of conditions. And the thing is, when we started teaching women to build things, like they build wells, they build toilets, they build water filters, they build tanks and rainwater harvesting. Just walking up a ladder is forbidden, right? But here's what I think I kind of knew intuitively, but I didn't articulate it well in the beginning, was that water is one of the things that people will always agree on, right? If you're living in an area that doesn't have it, then it doesn't matter if you, a man, a woman, a child, a husband, a daughter, right? It doesn't matter. You all need the water. And it doesn't matter if you're like the richest person or the best construction worker in your community. If you guys don't have water, or you're a wife or a student, it doesn't matter what position you hold. You all still agree that you need water. And so it was that brought people together. And when somebody comes in with a solution that works, and that is, and that the community feels like um, they're the ones involved in building it and putting it together, then the whole gender bias was a thing. It was an issue, but not as big as one. And it didn't last because there was these women learned something that people didn't know how to do in their communities. And it was something they all needed. And so when the women started doing it, of course they got some resistance, but eventually people just came around and started to support them, because part of our model is when they've learned how to construct something and they go home, we require that they build at least two, one with us and one without us, so they can do it on their own. So for example, they learned how to build wells recently. We gave them enough money to build, we gave them half the amount that they needed to build a full well, because what they needed to do is we needed to challenge them to be able to mobilize the community and get them to contribute and put their own blood, sweat, tears, money, materials into it. And so that just breeds more community ownership. And so they're not only learning how to construct, they're learning how to mobilize the community. They're also learning how to mobilize resources. They're gaining influence because they're bringing in something that people want. And I think it's sort of sneaking, it's like disguising the work. It's a women's leadership. One of our donors said it's a women's leadership program disguised as a water program, because bringing that water in and, something everybody needs in the sanitation and the whatever, right? Bringing something that everybody needs, you know, all bets are off. It's like, you're bringing us water. Okay. I don't care what you look like. I don't care if you ever, you're not supposed to go up a ladder. We need water. And so over time, because we've been working with some of our women for over 15 years. Over time, one of our trainees, at the first training she came to, she resisted everything. She was like, oh no, that's not going to work, or that's not, whatever. And then one of the activities we did was I taught them how to test water using simple water tests that they can use on their own body and that they could use on their own, so that it doesn't look like some scientist or researcher is messing up the test or the results. And she saw that we were testing for E. coli in the presence of feces, which is an indicator of the presence of feces in water, which is how most water-related disease spread. And so she was testing her water and it came out extremely contaminated. And she totally didn't want to believe that. She was like, I've been, giving this water to my family for decades and they're fine. And, so she was very, very resistant. And then, you think about, I don't know if you've ever heard about that analogy or metaphor that Malcolm X used to use. He said, when people have dirty water, don't tell them they have dirty water, because they're going to resist it. They're going to tell you they don't. They're going to give you all the reasons why, that it's not dirty. Yeah. What you do is you just offer an alternative. You show them a clean glass of water and then they choose. And that's what we did. right? We weren't going to say you're wrong. Your daughter's going to get sick eventually, whatever. Right. And eventually she came completely around, and she was like, she has been our biggest ambassador since, because once she figured out a solution, an alternative, something that she could do about it, then, like I said, all bets are off. And so and that was extraordinary, right? And because it wasn't us forcing feminism or
Right.
gender equality or, or anything like that. It was just like, we have a shared need, right? I happen
Mm-hmm.
to have a solution that you need, but you can help me because I can teach you, and let's just do it.
Right.
And they did it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
now, and so the next year when she came to another training, she was 9 months pregnant. She went home. When we built a tank together, she learned how to build the
Wow.
tank, and she went home 2 days later. She had a baby, and it was very sweet of her. She named her baby Gemma. And so the next year, when she was learning how to build toilets, she came with baby Gemma on her back. And so here, she's sawing and she's mixing cement and she's hammering, whatever, right? Laying bricks. And then the next year, baby Gemma comes and she's walking and she's like helping us mix cement, whatever. She's doing all this really cool stuff. And what's great is cause she's one of the people we've known for over a decade, right? Like, her daughter's now a teenager, and she's been growing up in a world where her mother and other women around her, this is normal.
Yeah.
It's normal for them to build the things. It's normal for them to like have businesses and make more money than their husbands. It's normal for them to do things. And so we're already seeing this culture change happening. And it's
Mm-hmm.
all because of a shared need that the community decided was
Yeah.
something they all needed to work together to change.
Great. So, in the way I was thinking about it, you're not breaking patterns. In that way, you are offering a choice and people choose. And then over time,
Exactly.
change happens.
Yes. Offer
Yeah,
an
that's great.
alternative. Let them make the choice. And that's really what it is. It's not like, so when we bring stuff, we're not saying this is how you should do it. This is how you should go into the community and get them to do stuff. We know they already have relationships with their people in their community. So what we just do is like, here are tools. Here are, skills. Here are things, technologies that are going to be useful to you. You decide how you're going to implement them in your community. Who do you need to get involved? What resources do you have access to that you don't have access to that somebody else has? It just becomes then them going into community and leading their own projects and implementing in a way that is very specific to their own community and their relationships in the community.
Yeah, I'm happy I asked that question because that is definitely a different shift to, I think, how most people think about encouraging social change. It's like, okay, we gotta break that pattern, gotta help them do this differently, but
Yeah.
approach it in a more confronting way.
Yeah. Yeah. And making it not, it's always, some of the best storytelling is, especially when it comes to doing social impact work, it's always introducing what's at stake, right? What is at
Mm-hmm.
stake if you don't have clean water, right? Because that also is a decision that they're making. It's not us telling them they're right or wrong. It's them going, do I want my life like this to continue in the same way? Or do I want it to change because I have this alternative, right? And what's at stake if I stay the same way? Well, if I don't make any change, then you're basically almost assured that things are going to remain the same or worse, right? And then if you offer an alternative that's something that is meeting a need, then that's when your curiosity can get sparked, and your choice is I don't want to say valid, but your choice directs you, right? And it actually opens up a different story.
Wow. I have one last question, and for
Okay.
that, we actually have to shift back to like the more personal side of things.
Oh, okay.
This is the last
That was
question
it
that I
personal?
right. So the podcast is called Close the Gap. And the reason I called it like that is because I wanted to be metaphorical, but also descriptive. And I've been described as someone who helps people close gaps. The way I think about it is closing the gap between idea and action, but it could be any kind of gap. So I'm wondering, what is a gap that you're currently trying to close?
Well, so I don't know how you define gap, because I think mine is similar, but it's not gaps. It's leaks.
Okay.
Because to me, we are perfect. We as humans are like, we're perfect for who we are, right? For the person that we're supposed to be. And I think where I like to focus on people and developing their leadership is like finding where their leaks are. Where are the places where they're either letting go of their power, or they're not protecting themselves, or they're not, they're forgetting, they're not paying attention to certain things. It's like, where are those leaks? Because I feel like we're already sort of complete. And I say that because, and I was kind of making this up right now. I love these questions because it's making me sort of like articulate what is already sort of in my head and saying it out loud. So the work, when we're doing work with women, and, our organization's called She Builds Power. So if you haven't figured it out yet, but I have two things going on at the same time. And when we work with women, and we work in the, the social sector. And so the word that I hear almost every day that still makes me cringe, and I didn't figure out why it made me cringe until just like a few years ago, but it's that word empower, right? Empower implies a transfer of power, a giving away of power when somebody else lacks it, right? So that word, I understand how it's been used and sort of co-opted to be like, oh, we want to uplift people. We want them to feel like they can do things themselves, right? But but implies that it's somebody else doing something for them in order for that to happen, right? And I think what they want to say is not empower. Just, I'm getting into linguistics, right? I think what they want to say, and what I figured out is that feels more resonant and feels accurate, is the word up power. Because these women, like, we're doing this whole series on TikTok right now on the STEM channel, because the women that we're working with, I told you some of the, the sort of demographics they are. Some of them undereducated, they are living in poverty, they, in terrible situations. So I don't, they're doing, I think, way more work to stay alive, or, to stay alive than somebody like me is, who's got air conditioning and, and I can take a taxi over here and blah, blah, right? I have water that I can turn right on. And they're doing things that is like STEM in real life. They're managing their budgets and trying to make money go really far. They're starting businesses. So that's your math right there. The science, we're working with, we're teaching them regenerative agriculture, soil regeneration, all that stuff, all science, right? Technology, they're constructing things, right? Engineering, they're designing technologies. They're already living in STEM. They don't have to go to a classroom to learn the basics of STEM. They have it already. And so when I talk about leaks, I'm talking about systems that are not helping, that are not harnessing the value and the resilience and the brilliance of these women, right? And the leaks in them are, they believe it. Their leaks in them is that whoever told them they couldn't climb ladders and them believing it, has just sprung a leak in her body, right? Somebody who's just saying that, a family, a culture that's telling them when they get their periods, they can't do any work, they can't touch anything, they can't do anything. That sprung another leak, right? And I feel like these women are already so brilliant. So what we're doing, in my mind, is we're uppowering. They already have the power within them. All we're doing is helping them unleash it. And so that whole leaking piece is that, is just around making those, creating sort of these patches or growing more confidence that builds these, that sort of heals those leaks
Mm,
and those wounds. And that's, to me, what I think that's sort of how I approach this work with women, right? And not seeing it as me going in there as this person of privilege who just
yes.
happened to be able to have access to, courses that I know how to build this and courses where I know how to test that, right? I am there, but for the grace of God, I was born in the United States with a family who was, making money, not like the people who are in Africa or my cousins who live in the province here, right? And for me, it really is just about where can we help people stop leaking their joy and leaking their value and leaking so I mean, I just imagine it like oozing and just like sucking
Hmm.
the life out of them. And so how do we help them to heal that so
Mm.
those leaks are patched up and she can thrive in ways she never imagined or the way she deserves.
I love that metaphor. It sounds a bit like it's not really change that they are required to go through, but it is becoming more of who they actually are already.
Yes, that's exactly it. Like I said, I really do believe we come out perfectly to do what we're supposed to do in the world, right? And that is it's a completely romantic view. And I don't mind it. I don't mind being romantic. Like, when I say, I wonder what the universe has in store for me, people would think that's woo woo. But for me, it just wakes me up in a world where I can be curious, right? And that's a choice. I just use a certain metaphor for it, right? But I don't, but it's just the same as somebody just waking up and saying, I'm going to walk a different way to work today. You know what I mean? So for me, it really is about understanding that we came out, that we have, there is perfection to us. And then we lose it. We learn certain things and then we have to unlearn them. And then we believe certain things because no one's challenging it, or there's somebody who's more powerful telling me it's true, right? And it really is just allowing ourselves to just, like, let us be, like what I say about water. It's like, or the song, it's like, let the song do what it's supposed to do, right?
Mhm.
And that's how I see water too. It's like, let water do what it wants to do. Water is going to flow and find the path of least resistance, and it's going to shape mountains. And it's like, let water do what it wants to do, or what it's
Mhm.
supposed to do. And so even like, when you're building, cities and stuff, it's like the earth can't do what it's supposed to do because we're covering it, right? Let the earth do what it wants to do.
Yeah.
So that's what I feel like. It's like, let us do what we're supposed to do. And it doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't need to be like, I have to start the best startup and win all these awards. I have to be a famous start. No, it can just be, I am totally equipped to be the best mother for, to raise a child in a world that is volatile and uncertain, right? It doesn't need to, and I'm not saying that's not grand. That is absolutely grand. We need that now more than ever, but I'm not saying
Yeah.
that it needs to be visible.
Anything in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. Gemma, it's been so nice to talk with you and to go deep on these things. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for opening up and bringing all the stories.
Thank you. This was, I would say about 90% of this interview, I have never, ever really talked about. So thank
Great.
you
Happy.
for extracting that out of me.
Yeah. Thanks for
I just
letting me.
leaked all over you. I leaked all my stories all over you. No,
All right. Thank you.
you're very welcome.